I'd like to tell you about the Lumina Spark qualities of conceptual and practical. Conceptual sits in big picture thinking and practical sits in down to earth. Using the Jungian lens, big picture thinking is what Jung would call intuition, and down to earth is what Jung called sensing, or being in your senses. If we adopt the Big Five acronym of OCEAN, big picture thinking relates to being open to experience, and down to earth is being less open to experience. But what do we mean by conceptual? Well, we mean that you enjoy a good theory and you like to learn through theorizing and understanding a theory. We also mean, if you're conceptual, that you can see the richness and the complexity in a situation. You can abstract ideas and see the depth. And finally, this means that you're likely to be able to see the patterns in data and spot correlations, maybe ahead of other people that are less conceptual. If, on the other hand, you're highly practical, you actually like to keep things simple. You don't want to over-theorize or abstract. You want to be in the real world, sensible, practical, and keep it simple. You also like to learn through doing things, so you don't have such a strong need to understand the theory, but as long as you can get on and experience it, that's how you like to learn. And finally, if you're practical, well, you want to be realistic. You don't want to commit to something that's not going to work. You want to be able to touch it, see it, feel it, and make sure that whatever you're doing is in the real world. So one example that I have to remember conceptual versus practical relates to my early day experience when I worked at British Airways at Heathrow Airport. And I can recall going to meet the engineering department and signing up to go on a total quality management course, which was very popular in the late 80s and early 90s. And through that course, I really took on board the principles, swallowed the TQM dictionary, and then my first project was to look at the British Airways baggage hall and see how can we improve performance. So I went in there armed with my TQM models, my flip chart and my pens, and started to talk to the baggage handlers about how we could improve the performance through using TQM. Understandably, they weren't impressed with these theories and ideas from my good self. They were in the practical world. They thought the problem is not a process map and a flow of the airport, that the problem is actually that the people in the other terminal aren't charging the tugs overnight, and there are practical things, common sense things we need to do to improve performance without any need for a flip chart. So needless to say, I needed to connect with their practical side, work with them for a number of weeks, actually hump some bags and be with them so I could understand their practical world before I could get to the stage of introducing quite carefully some of the concepts that I knew would work based on TQM. If we just do one of the polarities, we'd be less effective. What was really needed here was a highly practical focus, because it's a practical job, but also to bring in appropriately some useful concepts where they'll add value. That's how I like to remember conceptual versus practical, and it's not uncommon for consultants to have a high preference for being conceptual and people in operational departments to be more practically focused. But have you got an example? Is there a story in your experience that would help explain conceptual and practical to the people that you work with?